This is So In Flow, a podcast to help you activate the power of creative flow in every part of your life, business, and of course, creative process to make your creative dreams reality. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Seahorse Bookstore, the independent bookstore with a mission to awaken the imagination. Order your books and stream your audiobooks through Seahorse. Hey, this is Molly Murray. Welcome to So In Flow. Hi there, I'm Molly Murray. I'm a creative flow coach, an energy healer, and a rapid transformational therapy practitioner. I'm also a proudly neurodiverse writer, and I own Seahorse Bookstore in Scotland.
Hello, So In Flow. We are so excited today. I am so excited you are here listening, and I am so excited to introduce you to one of our favorite Seahorse authors, Karen Campbell. Karen Campbell is based in Galloway. She is the author of 8 novels. She graduated with distinction from Glasgow University's Creative Writing Masters, same place I got my master's, and has won an SAC New Writers Award and a Creative Scotland Bursary. Before turning to writing, she was a police officer in Glasgow, then a press officer with Glasgow City Council. She also tutors and mentors in creative writing, and was writer-in-residence at Dumfries and Galloway Council during the COVID pandemic. Her 8th novel, Paper Cup, is out now with Canongate. Karen has appeared at festivals around the country and abroad, and on Radio 4, Radio 3, Radio Scotland, and BBC Television's Big Scottish Book Club. You can find out more about her at karencampbell.scot. But for the time being, I'm really excited for you to meet her here today. Thank you so much for joining me today, Karen.
Thank you very much for having me. I had such a good time when I was at your bookshop in the summer, so it's a pleasure to be back chatting to you.
Oh, I'm so glad you are. We have been talking about you since then. You've been one of our favorite author visits. And I was a little surprised not to see Seahorse on your biography. No, just kidding.
I'll amend that. Sorry.
Yes. No, Karen is one of our favorite Seahorse authors. Very popular. We did her book Paper Cup in the book club, and everyone was just so impressed. But impressed is the wrong word, because it was so heartful, and we all just fell in love with this book and the characters. So I'll be asking Karen about that and her wonderful creative process today. Just to start off with, Karen, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and about your journey with creativity?
Yeah, sure. It used to be always I'd be introduced at any, book talk I did as a former police officer, because my first 4 books were about the police. And you could always see people doing a kind of double take, like, she was in the police and she can write a coherent sentence. That doesn't compute. And so I would always sort of begin by explaining my journey, because folk just didn't seem to think it made sense. But I always loved books, writing. It's the way I make sense of the world. I don't always know what I think about something till I write it down. It's like you tease stuff out of your head and go, oh, okay, that's what that lump was. I'm making it make sense. So it was just always a natural thing for me to do. And I studied English straight from school. I went to Glasgow Uni and started doing my English degree there. And I was 17 when I started. No idea what I wanted to do. I just knew I loved books. So study English, that's what you do. And the longer the course went on, the more I got scunnered with books. I just felt that the magic was going out of them. When you start to analyze something and take it apart and just overthink it, that there was no pleasure in reading anymore. So I ended up thinking, I don't want to do anything to do with language or literature. What do I want to do? And graduated one Tuesday and joined Strathclyde Police the next Tuesday, which again seems a bit weird, but my dad was a police officer, my mum had been a police officer. And I think when you're rooting about sometimes as a young person, not knowing what you want your future path to be, you gravitate to what is known. And I knew enough about that job to think, well, it's an important job. No 2 days are ever the same. It's, as a young person, you feel kind of crusading and you want to make a difference. So that's what I did. But I wasn't particularly good cop. I was book smart, but not street smart. And I won't go into some of the embarrassing things that happened to me. But yeah, I kind of knew quite quickly that it wasn't the job for me. So long story short, I left after about 6 years, had my first daughter then. And I found that once I'd left the police, I began to write and read again. And I think, again, it was a way of processing the fact that I'd been in this job that was an important job. It impacts on all of your life. People respond to you differently. And you see a lot of bad things and you see a lot of good things and good people too. And I began writing these stories about my time there, not crime stuff, just human things about little interactions with people, funny moments. So I ended up having a bit of a portfolio of short stories, not knowing what to do with them. And then I read an article in a newspaper about the degree course that they did at Glasgow Uni, the MLit as it was then. And I thought, ooh, I had two small kids at that point. That's all I got. It's two small kids, but they were still little. But I definitely felt I was ready for something beyond nappies and Sudocrem. So I applied to the course and I sent off my short stories as my portfolio and kind of just waited with bated breath and thought, you know, nobody's ever looked at my work before. What if it's rubbish? And I got accepted. So that was a hugely transformational moment in my creativity. Just something going from being very private and inside your head to having some degree of sort of public approval that someone else thought it was worth, exploring, and then being in an environment over 2 years where you're talking about writing and characters and you're with other people who don't think it's a weird thing to do because they're also writers, and it just made that transition from writing being something almost like a guilty secret to something that I could own and enjoy and see myself just immersing myself in it.
Oh, how wonderful. Thank you so much for telling us about that. And tell me more, like your books are so full of heart. So just tell me what you are interested in creating this world and what you would like, what impact you would love your books to create.
Yeah, I think with every book I've written, including the police ones, that they kind of got, marketed as crime fiction, which I was never comfortable with and always said they're not, because although the first four were about cops, I very much wanted to kind of get behind the uniform and again talk about these personal things about how, you put on a uniform and you're seen as a symbol of authority, but you're still the same daft lassie you were last week at university. Obviously, you get training, they don't just let you loose right away, but you know what I mean? It's like you're still a 20-year-old girl thinking, oh my God, they've put me in charge of Sauchiehall Street. I don't know what I'm doing. And all of those insecurities and that kind of contrast between the idea you've got to project yourself as one thing, but inside your stomach's in knot. It's not about violence as much as getting it wrong, just not knowing what you're doing. And I think everything I've ever written has definitely been about facades, about what you see on the surface and what the reality or the truth is, and that it's always multi-dimensional. Nothing's just one faceted. So all those sort of sweeping judgments we make about people because we think by looking at them we kind of I know what kind of person that is, and everybody is multiform and various and fascinating. And I guess if there was one thing I would like from my writing is just and I've got to be careful that I'm not trying to be dictatorial and say here's things that I think you should think about. Just we should all maybe just take a moment just to stop and not walk past and just look a wee bit closer or look at a different angle from a person or a situation that we think we know, because I think invariably we don't, because nobody knows us 100% and we can't know everyone else or anyone else 100%. And you know how we expand and share humanity together is about empathy, isn't it? It's about seeing someone and not thinking they're other and different from you, but seeing the similarities. So I think that's what I like to explore with my writing.
Oh, how beautiful. If there's one thing that will change the world, it is empathy. That's what I always think and say, like, that's what my work is all about, is creating empathy. Because I just feel like if we started a revolution of empathy, like the world would look entirely different. And that's what we
100%. Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and that's what we all loved so much about Paper Cup is, for those of you listening, it's this story of a homeless woman who goes on a journey through a series of amazing adventures. She goes on a journey down south to Dumfries and Galloway from Glasgow, and it turns out to be a journey of the soul and a life journey as well. And along the way, she meets so many colorful and amazing characters. And one of the things that's so remarkable about this book is they are the people you would meet every day in Glasgow or roundabout this area in Scotland. But what I love so much is that Karen gives so much empathy to every character. They are so fully fleshed and colorful, and you really see a lot of heart, even if they're only in for a few pages. There is so much depth to each character. And so that's just a little background for Paper Cup. But now I'd love to ask you more about that, Karen, and maybe about the process of writing that book.
Yeah, and well, thank you for saying those nice things. I'm glad that you thought that, because yeah, that was part of what I was trying to do, was just again this little glimpses of people. But that's how we live life, isn't it? You glance off other people. We don't get to know everyone intimately, but they can still have an impact on you, or you can still maybe change how you feel about something after an interaction, good or bad. So that was one of the aims. But with Paper Cup, it was the fastest book I've ever written. Every book comes differently. The book I'd written before that was a historical novel set in Italy in World War II called The Sound of the Hours, and that took me 4 years to write because I had to do a ton of research. I had to go to Italy twice, which was terribly traumatic.
Oh, dear.
I loved it. And, you know, I had to then chip away a lot of the history that I didn't need to get to the story. So it just took forever. And it was like wading through mud at times. It was a battle in itself. But I'm really proud of the book. But Paper Cup was the one that came after that. And I think I needed to kind of almost have a palate cleansing sorbet of a book, you know, one that, I don't mean that in a frivolous way, I just mean one that came differently. And this one, because it was local, set where, you know, near where I live, I could go out every day and actually research the places that Kelly would go to, and then come home that night and write, and it'd be really fresh. I could still smell the peat bog, or I could, you know, hear the red kite making its screeching in the sky, sort of thing. So it was very fresh, very elemental, and I wrote the first draft in about 3 months. So it was a much quicker process. And Kelly was one of those characters that she kind of arrived fully formed in a way not many of my characters do, but she very much was her own person, and she had her own sense of humor. And you know, probably with my earlier books, the characters, certainly the two main characters in the police books, they were like two halves of me, but Kelly was nothing like me, I don't think at all. And I just kind of let her come and followed her. And yeah, it became a journey for me as a writer, as well as her having a kind of metaphorical journey and also a physical journey. So whenever I start a book, I never know how it's going to end. And it was the same with Kelly. I knew she was going to go on a journey. I didn't know what she was going to, what she was leaving behind, and or what would happen in the middle. Or who she would meet actually on the way either. So those things just sort of happened organically, and that can be scary, I think, with creativity too. And whenever I teach creative writing, especially if you're in schools or something, you know, and kids are very like, they think they need a beginning, a middle, and an end. They're quite, you know, they're being taught in a linear fashion. Um, and it's about saying to them, no, just shake that off, just jump in. Think of it like a big pool of water. You don't know how deep it is, you don't know where you're going to go in it, but just immerse yourself in whatever it is that's kind of, you know, the itch under your skin, and just go with it. So Kelly was on a journey, and I thought, okay, well, if she starts here and I want to get her to there, because I knew I wanted to be in Dumfries and Galloway, how can I do that? And then where do I want her to go thereafter? And what is the thing that's linking all of this? So yeah, it was a very sort of circular process that I just kind of circle the idea, tease it out, and then it's a bit like when you're small and you're, you know, you play with dolls or you play a make-believe game. One thing just happens, doesn't it? And then another thing, and you haven't got a script prepared, you don't have your dolls with lines to learn. It just begins to unfold. Some interaction, some, you know, narrative begins, and that's the way it happens with me with writing. Then you have to go back and tidy up all the messes and the dead ends and things that you've made, which is maybe not the most logical way to work, but it's the way that works for me, definitely.
Oh, thank you so much. I love that. Now, could you tell us a bit more about what inspired you to write Paper Cup in the first place? Now, Kelly is one of my favorite characters in all of literature, honestly. I'm being honest about this because she's so fully formed. She's not perfect. I love um an imperfect heroine, you know. She's definitely got lots of flaws and is a diamond in the rough. And you just see all of these sides of her character, which I think is just fantastic to write. But you write her with so much love and empathy. And that really comes across so that, you know, as a book club, we all just felt this deep fondness for Kelly and for all of the characters. And so I'd love to know what inspired you in the first place.
Well, thank you for that. I think with Kelly in particular, and I've also written a novel about a Somali refugee in Glasgow, and that was another, you know, character that's very far from my own experience. But with both of them, it was very much about, I think, you know, my police background actually has been really useful as a writer because you see people at the margins, you can't walk past them. You have to engage with them in a way that you might get to know somebody. You know, if somebody, if you've got your own sort of patch that you work in and people are recurrent characters in that street scene, you get to know them a little bit and you learn that everyone's got a story. And so with Kelly, I wanted to make her feel real and human, not that some, I think if somebody's on the margins and it makes us feel uncomfortable, often we tell ourselves that they're so far removed from us that it could never happen to us. People like them, you know, it's almost, I'm not saying that they deserve it, but there's some big chasm, some gulf that makes those people different. And it makes us feel more safe and secure in our lives because we would never be on a street begging. But having, you know, engaged with homeless people as a cop, you learn that folk have stories and they did have lives before and that they didn't choose that life and that they didn't necessarily want to stay there either. And you know, there's lots of barriers in terms of addictions and maybe mental health issues. And again, this idea of being multifaceted. So I wanted that to be part of Kelly's makeup, that she's a person who has a life. And at one point in the book, she actually talks about, wouldn't it be great if you had a wee sort of TV screen playing all the highlights of your life across your forehead, and then people walking past you would see you as a wee girl at school or see you starting university, which Kelly did, and know that you were more than what they were deciding you were at that point. So yeah, I think every step of the way with Kelly, I was just trying to give her that respect that you know, I'm not a homeless person. I never have been, and I didn't want to treat the issue lightly or assume any sort of stereotypes if I could avoid it. And I think that's true of every piece of writing that writers do. That you know, you're writing about a character, not about an issue. So Kelly's character and her sense of humor was a godsend because, you know, if something's an uncomfortable subject, I don't want to read a book to feel I come out of it thinking, oh God, that was like going through a torture, you know. So it's hard to sort of balance that light and shade. But Kelly came with this fully formed sense of humour that she was really quite feisty and gives herself wee pep talks and you know, she's good Scots word. She's gallus. She doesn't see herself as a victim. So that made her a gift in that way that I just kind of channeled her at times. And you know, I know I made her up, but yeah, there was just times I was like, oof, okay, don't know where that came from, Kelly, but I'll write that down. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Now tell me more about channeling creativity. That's totally what I believe is that creativity is an energy that we can channel. I would love to know how you use that in your practice.
Yeah, it's really hard to sort of put it in a nutshell, isn't it? I think it's about trusting to take that plunge. It's about not waiting for the muse to come and tap you on the shoulder with a fully formed, coherent idea or stage directions or a character. It's always just like some kind of itch or some kind of unfurling that it begins. And you know, I've finished another novel and it's hopefully coming out a year in spring, so 2025. And I haven't written anything for ages, but I've had an idea that I've been circling and circling. And so just before we came on here, I just wrote 500 words. I just thought, stop faffing about, just get something down. And I have no idea if it's a beginning, a middle, or an end. I don't even quite know if it's what I want, but it's something on the page. And I think I think that's really important is that you can get overwhelmed with creativity. You can have so many ideas zinging about and you're like, a dog chasing hundreds of sheep, and you know, you just need to decide, I'm going to jump in here, see what happens. And yeah, you make choices. But I think when you start out writing, you're always frightened about, if I make this choice, what if that means the book isn't going to turn out the way it should, or the best book it can be? But all that happens is if you make a choice, you begin to swim, if you take the pool analogy, in one direction. And yeah, that whole horizon over there still exists. You can revisit that. You can backstroke to it if you want, but just begin that momentum, see where it takes you. And then a shape begins to form. And you just got to trust that. You know, it's a bit like, I'm not comparing myself to the great, but I think it was Michelangelo, wasn't it, that said he could see the shape inside marble before he began to carve it. And you know, that's not quite what I'm saying, but there is that sense of trust that if you begin the process, you'll begin to harness and amass, and it'll become like things start flying in like serendipity, you know, and things you'll read will be like, oh my God, that's a perfect thought to go in this book. And you know, these things were all out there all the time, but once you begin committing that you're going to embark on this new creative journey, it's like the world becomes electric, and you start to see shapes and patterns and themes and food for this beast you're creating. And like I say, it's always been there. So it's just your brain has become more attuned, and you're kind of knitting the story together. So you're looking for these strands of color that were just kind of floating past you until you know, there's a real, I think, two brains as a writer or any creative person. I think you've got your that moment of inspiration, that itch, that sense of, oh, we shiver, yeah, there's something there. But if you just relied on that, I don't think you create very much. You've also got your workman brain that you've got to roll up your sleeves and say, right, okay, let's start this. Let's chop it into shape when we get to the editing process. Let's, you know, sort of turn it upside down and see where the holes are. So it's two different processes, and you've just got to allow yourself to run with both and instinctively feel when one brain should take over from the other. Like I say, with the history book I wrote, I had all the creativity and the fun and everything, but then the workman brain was like, yeah, but you've written 10 pages about how they made clogs out of parachute silk and old tires just because you learned it, but it's not important to the story. So let's chop all that away. And you know, it's like you're having a conversation with yourself, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. So much depth in there. One of my favorite things is the serendipities and synchronicities that come into life through creativity. And I love that you brought that up. Could you tell us more about the serendipities that have come along your path as maybe you were writing Paper Cup or your new book or any of your other ones?
Um, Again, it's hard, isn't it? Because, like I say, I think when you sort of take that plunge and think, okay, I'm going to start this thing that's been niggling away at me, it's like the world just changes color, and things become sharpened because you've engaged that part of your brain that is like gathering and honing. And so I'm not sure if it's serendipity or that you're actively seeking things out. But yeah, there are wee moments. There's a lovely, in fact, I don't know if you can see, there's a picture behind me, a painting
Mm-hmm.
on my wall, and it's a lovely Italian landscape with a sort of old-fashioned Italian building and blue sky and green grass, and it's beautiful, vibrant colours. So I first saw that painting when we went on holiday to a place called Barga in Italy. It was in the holiday home we were staying at, and I walked in the door and I was like, it just blew me away, the painting. It was lovely. Um, and we've been back to Barga 3 or 4 times. It's actually where the war book is set, The Sound of the Hours. I wouldn't go into detail about that, but the point is that the person who ran that holiday house is an artist and a lovely pianist as well, and he'd painted that, and we've become friends with him. And obviously, I've been back and forth because I was writing the novel that I was writing, and I was struggling for a title in the book. Um, it's about Buffalo soldiers, US soldiers that were black, and they were segregated in the Second World War, and they liberated this part of Italy. So I was playing with, you know, things to do with buffalo in the title. I can't remember what else, but all the words that came up just didn't sound right, and I could not nail this title. And then I started reading some poetry by a guy called Pascali, who is an Italian poet from the Barga area. And there was one poem he wrote and it's about hearing the bells in Barga ringing. And one of the lines in it is the sound of the hours. And I knew that during the war they had silenced the bells so that it didn't alert. I can't remember what the reason was. I think it was, it doesn't matter, but part of what they did to keep the place safe was and it didn't work anyway, they silenced the bells. And I just love this line, the sound of the hours, because it was about the soundscape changing in that place with the war, and it wasn't bucolic and peaceful anymore. And so that's what the title ended up being. Then just after the book was published, it was my 50th birthday, and lo and behold, this painting arrives from my husband as my 50th birthday present. I was like, how did you get that from Italy? And he said, well, I spoke to Riccardo, our friend who painted it, and asked if he would sell it to me. And because Barga has got so many Scots-Italian connections, there's a wee van that goes from Barga once a month with like supplies, people that want home cooking from Barga, like pasta and things, it brings it over and it takes things back. So Doogie booked the picture on that wee van and it got brought here. And when I contacted my friend Riccardo to say, it's the most wonderful present, thank you so much. I said, where is it? I know it's somewhere locally, but where is the painting? I've just always loved it. And he said, oh, I thought you knew. It's the house of Pasquale, the poet, who is where I got the title from the book, for the book from.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
chills. That is so magical. And I just have to tell you the synchronicity that has happened as you were speaking. I've been admiring that painting since we got on. It's actually so much like this card that I have. I got it when I was 17 years old. I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma for my cousin's wedding, and we went to this big art museum. It was a house, I'm not sure who it belonged to, but someone very wealthy who modeled it off of their favorite place in Italy. Anyhow, it looked just like that painting. So I got this card of it because I loved that place. And that's actually where I met my husband, Gordon. He was at my cousin's wedding. We didn't get together for years after that, but I'm just like mind boggled by these synchronicities.
I know.
I mean, I wouldn't be here right now were it not for that.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? It is amazing.
Oh, it's just
Yeah.
amazing. But beautiful, like synchronicities. It's just like a fun little nudge from the universe.
I think so, yeah, or maybe just a sign that you were on the right track. I think sometimes your subliminal self when you're creating will gather things and you don't know where it's come from, and then you look back and you think, oh yeah, I had a wee theme there that I was examining, exploring, but I don't know if you actually did or not consciously, but somehow it's like it kind of knits itself at times when you're writing, and you're like, oh, that was very clever of me, but I didn't mean to do that. So I think sometimes just don't question too much, just go with the flow, and that's why I think not being prescriptive and just enjoying the process, and yeah, doing the hard work afterwards, but in the beginning stages, just like slapping on the paint on a canvas, just get messy, just see what you've got, and then you can begin to create something really meaningful once you've got this messy stuff out and the excitement dies down, and then I think the real work begins.
I love that. Go with the flow. Definitely one of my favorite sayings. Could you tell me how you get into creative flow? How do you find that? Does it happen to you, or do you create it intentionally? What is your practice?
I think more now I create it intentionally. I think when writing moved from being a kind of hobby that, just when an idea comes, you pick up the pen and write. When it started to become my job, like I say, you can't afford, professionally and creatively, I don't think, and financially, just to wait for an idea. So you have to start looking at other ways of channeling that creativity. So, and like I was saying, I wrote 500 words before we started chatting because I've thought about this thing for so long, and I just thought, I've got 10 minutes, let's just do this. And I think now that I've got 500 words down, tomorrow I might write another 500, and just build up little blocks, and I liken it to sort of a dripping tap, that something will flow eventually if you just let a drip come at a time. And it might be that the stuff that began as a wee drip you just discard because it's not what you need, but I think you need to begin the actual flow of words coming out of your head onto a page to start to unlock what it is you're trying to reach. So I started writing when my girls were at school, so I kind of kept to that office hours that I write in the day. I don't really write in the evenings. I sometimes write at weekends if I'm really on a flow and I want to sort of keep that going. But I think little and often works for me, because I think once you start doing that, it's like the story moves from the back of your brain to the front, and it becomes more alive. And that these sort of moments I'm talking about, where you have these clicks and connections, and you're like, oh yeah, thank you, universe. Um, the universe isn't throwing things at me. It's just I'm more perceptive and aware, and I'm thinking more deeply about what it is I'm trying to weave together. So I'm aware of things that I might otherwise miss, I think, and I'm capturing things actively. Um, and then I always, if I maybe write 5 days a week, I always begin by not going over everything I wrote before, but just the last few pages, to kind of get back into the rhythm and the flow of the actual music of the words, so that there's not jarring changes in tempo or anything when I begin again. Because I don't usually finish on a chapter or something. I just finish when, when I've run out of steam, and I think, right, okay, I'm flogging a dead horse here now. Just stop and come back to it tomorrow.
I love that power of incremental steps. And law of attraction too, really, as that awareness grows from your subconscious and to your conscious mind. I love that. Now, could you tell me what inspires you and brings you joy? And
Ooh, that changes. I think other art, definitely. Um, During lockdown, I remember one time when you were able to travel about a bit more, being up in Glasgow, meeting my friend who still lives in Glasgow, outside Kelvin Grove Art Gallery. And we just went for a walk, because obviously the art gallery was shut. But I remember feeling this real pain that I couldn't get in and see the art. All this art was inside, and nobody was looking at it. And like, was it dying because it wasn't being loved? And one of the very first things I did when we were able to, and Kelvin Grove Museum opened again, I you had to book a ticket because they only limited, so many people to get in, so that I could go in and just drink in all the paintings that, I've known ever since I was a wee girl. Also, I think just looking at other beautiful things, not words, but and not music so much. I don't listen to music when I'm writing. I like just to be silent, but visual imagery definitely fills me up and moves me. Um, and I do feel sometimes when you've created something, it's like your well feels empty and you need to fill it up again. Um, I think also I've got two grandchildren now, and that's just been a revelation. It's like going back to being a mum again, but without all the hassles and heartache. You just get the sort of deep joy that you don't always have time when you're a mum to appreciate. So I think they definitely just, it's about basic humanity, and about love and nurturing and that kind of thing, and just, yeah, I think being alone with my thoughts too is another thing. The world's a very busy, fast place, and I quite like to be silent and still as well. Not all the time, but I think when I was little, and one of the joys of reading was this retreat into another world, and that sense of, you know, like I'd be up in my bedroom on the window seat, and I'd sometimes draw the curtains around me, so I'd be on the window seat looking out the window, but the curtains would be like hiding me from the room. Nobody else was there, but that sense of being enclosed and enfolded when I was in that other world. So I probably do that a wee bit. I've got a writing desk that's an old roll top, and I like that sense of it's raised, and it kind of encloses me when I sit there. So yeah, I'm not the sort of person that can write in noisy cafes with people blethering. I think also talking about writing, like I do some writing tuition, and that always, when you're talking about your own practice, it kind of refreshes you and reminds you about, oh yeah, I do that, because often you do things without thinking, but when you're kind of breaking things down and analysing, it makes me go, oh yeah, okay, that's quite good advice that I'm giving someone else. Maybe I should take it myself.
Oh, absolutely. It's like refreshing and renewal. Um, let's see. I would love to hear about a time that you met failure or rejection or a challenge maybe, and how you overcame it. Like, what did that teach you?
Well, when I was first trying to get published, got lots of rejection, lots of failure, and it was really hard. Because, like I say at the beginning, writing is a private, personal thing that you feel a bit embarrassed about, and then doing the masters, you become more sort of blasé, if you like, about exposing yourself and letting people analyze your work and not being too precious about it. Although inside you're like, I hate you for saying that, but you try not let that show. And then you finally create something, a book, and then you send it out into the world, and then you get rejection, and then you get more rejection. And I must have had about, I don't know, 20 or 30 knockbacks to get an agent. I mean, I thought I'm going to go down the agent route rather than put all my energies into getting a publisher, because the agent's like the gatekeeper. So once you've got them, they then deal with all the publishing issues, and you've kind of got a calling card because they've already taken you on. So they can open doors that a writer who's unknown can't. But yeah, I got lots of knockbacks, and it was really hard because it was sort of just emails were just coming in. It was the early 2000s, but everything still had to be submitted, in big envelopes. So it was like 3 chapters and a covering letter. So every other day you'd hear this thunk through the door as your 3 chapters get sent back from somewhere else. And I thought I could get really demoralized about this, but I believe in it. I think it's worth at least giving it a shot. So I started being more business-like. Again, it's this two-brain thing. Stop being vulnerable, get over yourself, treat it like a business. So I sort of sent out like to 3 or 4 agents at a time, waited 6 weeks, sent out to another 3 or 4, recycled some of the stuff that got sent back, and also started working on something else, because I thought, if I put all my eggs in one basket and get really forlorn about my rejections, then I'll just give up. So I started working on something else. So it was kind of like, I'm not thinking about that. I was, obviously, but I had somewhere else to focus my energies. Um, and I also thought, being like missing out on summer days with the kids, being stuck at the time, the room I wrote in, I was like facing a brick wall, like I've wasted so many hours doing this. I'm not going to keep doing it forever. So I gave myself a mental cut off, like the age, like if I wasn't published by the time I was 40, I was just going to quit, because I wasn't just writing for pleasure. I wanted, for me, writing is like a dialogue, that the book, it's lovely hearing the feedback that you and all the folk that came to the event in the store were giving me. I don't think the book exists until other people open it and those characters go out into the world. So I didn't want to just write for the sake of it and have these manuscripts piling up. So I thought, I'm going to give it my all, and if I'm not published by the time I'm 40, I'm going to stop, because that way I can really push, to the line for this, and then step away and say, well, I gave it everything I could. And luckily I did get published before then, but that was my way of dealing with the failure, that there's only so long you can keep saying, oh, this will be all okay, and then you start to think, well, maybe the universe is telling me something, and do I want to be miserable for 20 years banging at this door that won't open, because then it would cease to give you any pleasure at all, I think. So that was my way of kind of managing it.
Oh, I love that. That's so practical. Thank you so much. Um, and I'd love to know, I'm sure there were synchronicities surrounding that eventual yes. Could we know more about that process?
Well, I remember very clearly, I was watching, the Brit Awards, like the pop music thing. And it was
Mhm.
1 February, 10 o'clock at night. It just finished, sitting in my living room, and my phone rang. And nobody ever phones me at 10 o'clock at night. Um, and answered the phone, and this terribly posh voice was like, hello, could I speak to Karen Campbell, please? I thought it was somebody winding me up, one of my friends. I was like, yes, who's calling? And it was this agent who absolutely gushed down the phone and said, I have literally just finished your novel. Oh my God, it's wonderful. I love it. And my jaw nearly hit the floor, because I did so many, the rejection letters, like, it's not quite the right fit for us. We don't see it on our list. And just have that one person voice real enthusiasm and want to actually, you know, devote some time to progressing it and getting out to publishers. That, even more than seeing a book on a shelf, I think that moment was transformational in the same way that getting accepted to the MLET at Glasgow was transformational. It was a door, a portal that you went through, and everything was changed after that. And yeah, there was more good and bad things happening, but it was that sense of when you had been sort of banging at a door that was shut and then someone opened it. That was just incredible. And sometimes I've been asked in talks like, how do you choose your agent? As if like 20 people were begging me to give them, you know, my book. And I was like, she was the first one that asked to represent me. So yeah, I'm not with her now. I've got another agent now, but I'll be forever grateful to her for just, yeah, opening that door for me.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm so glad she did. So much magic in the world because she did and because you kept trying. I'm so glad to hear about that. Now, I would love to ask you about your favorite book or author or artist, like your favorite creative work that has really inspired you along the way.
One of my favorite books is Sunset Song by Lewis Grassic Gibbon, which most people of my age who are Scottish will know and either love or hate because it was a higher English text. And it probably is a book I would never have picked up at 16 or 17 if I didn't have to. But yeah, again, it was a sort of transformational moment for me because I, you know, I love books, I loved reading, but it was a story about a girl of the same age as me, albeit many hundreds of years before me, that she lived. It was about Scotland just at the First World War and how life was changing. And the thing that kind of heightened everything for me was that when I was doing my hires, we went over to South Africa to visit my grandparents who lived there, my dad's mum and dad, and I'd only seen them once before when I was 3. So they were pretty much strangers. You know, we got airmail letters from them and things, but they had lived there since before I was born. So I'd only seen them once before. And I think my grandpa had retired and must have got some money because he paid for us to go over on an extended 6-week holiday. And my mum and dad had to go up to the school and say, look, is it okay? It's educational, you know, we'll make sure she keeps doing her work. And I was a pretty good student. So the school were like, yeah, okay, we trust you. So I finished reading that book sitting in the hot sun in a suburb of Johannesburg by my grandmother's swimming pool. Reading this story about a sort of elegy for a way of life of Scotland that's gone now, and this young woman with all her hopes and dreams having to sort of accept the not bitter reality, but the reality of adulthood and how those dreams are sort of packed away quietly with your childhood clothes. And the tears were just coursing down my face. And I felt so homesick. I'd never felt more Scottish in my life. And also the way Lewis Grassic Gibbon wrote, he used Scots words, but he also used the sort of cadence of his words, the musicality of them. You could hear the lilting accents of the people of the Mearns up in Aberdeenshire. And that was just a revelation to me that words could be manipulated in that way that you know, maybe hard at first, but then once it clicked in, you're hearing the voice inside your head. And yeah, it was just magical and in a way that's like it sort of got inside my heart and never really left me.
Oh goodness, I love that so much. I love that you picked that book too. I need to read it. We have that book in our shop, and I know the cover very well because it's very popular. But I have to admit, I haven't read it yet. But I would say that that's the same feeling that readers get reading your work that you pick up. It just feels like you're traveling through Dumfries and Galloway, speaking to people and hearing their stories and walking the paths. Like it just feels so, I felt like I could feel the dirt in my fingers kind of feeling. I just loved that you captured the locality like that.
Thank you. I kind of
Yeah.
wanted it to be a bit of a love letter to Dumfries and Galloway because since we moved here about 11, 12 years ago, and it's like a wee forgotten corner of Scotland. You know, it's never really, it's not on the way to anywhere unless you're getting the ferry to Ireland. It's not as busy as going up north for holiday. We don't have a train line like they do in the Borders. It's just very much a kind of place on the margins, and there's so much beauty in it, and so many nice people too. So I wanted to just a sort of little nod to D&G and say, oh, it's nice down here, you should come.
That's lovely. That's just how we feel about North Ayrshire too, in our Dawson. It's just tucked away. It's hidden here. It's just like the best kept secret. But of course, we want more people to know and appreciate this beautiful Southwest coast. It's underappreciated for sure. To close this interview, I would love to ask you, what is your favorite advice for someone listening? I know we'll have lots of creative people, lots of readers and writers who listen to this. What would you like to tell them?
Don't be scared. Don't be scared to make yourself vulnerable. I think creativity, definitely you delve inside yourself, and once you start delving, you don't know what you're going to bring out, and that's okay, because it can still be personal and private until the moment you want to make it public. So don't be scared of exploring anything that comes up as you're, well, with me it's writing, but whatever creative process, just go with it, see what you've got, and then be more analytical and pare it down or shape it up. Or what I always say to writing students is, as soon as you distance yourself from what you've put on the page by making it someone else that's thinking or feeling these things, it's so liberating. That you, if all you're writing is, I'm feeling really angsty at the moment, I don't know what it is, and you just write that emotion, but then you change it into an old man, it's not me. And then your brain starts to go, well, why is he feeling that? And so you're taking what is essentially human in you, but giving it to someone else and then just going with it. And so you can always be really honest in mining yourself for emotional responses, but you don't have to be autobiographical. You don't have to give yourself away in a way that makes you feel not private. But I don't think you can have the shutters down when you write either. I think you need to be open to, giving yourself a good, I don't know how I would describe it, just opening yourself up. But then you decide, you filter it, you sieve it. You don't need to give that to the world, but you need to give it to your creativity, I guess, to begin the process of finding the shape in the marble and then chiseling it till it's something that's not you. But it's only ever come through you, because you only you can experience the world the way you experience it. I don't know if you feel or see the same way as I do, because it's only our own heads that we're ever in. So it's about accepting that, but then trying to craft other people and other scenarios from the sort of the dry kindling that's knocking about inside of you.
Oh, Karen, I absolutely love that. I want to give you a humongous round of applause. I feel like it wouldn't come across except the static in the microphone. But I'm just so thankful that you came on this podcast today, and can't wait to have you back in the shop when your new book comes out. Maybe we'll get you in before then too, if you want to do another event.
Anytime.
Yeah, but just so grateful for you. For anyone who's listening, you can look her up on her website, which is, let's see, karencampbell.scott. Do you have a Facebook group, or are you on Instagram? Any other socials?
I know I'm on Twitter at writer K Campbell, but that's all. I'm a bit of a social media Luddite. It feels like the world's like, it feels like you open your window and the whole world starts shouting at you. So no, I'm on Twitter, but that's it.
You're one of the cool kids, protecting your energy.
Or maybe I'm just really boring and have nothing interesting to post.
Oh, I know that's not true. Oh, well, thank you so much, Karen. And I hope you take care, but we're looking forward to your next ones and what creativity brings you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Did this episode resonate with you? If your heart feels that pain of being rejected, and you would love to heal the rejection wound and feel accepted, celebrated, and belonging, join Beloved, a 3-week experience to heal the rejection wound forever. It includes a live workshop and group gatherings, a pop-up Facebook group, and a pre-recorded rapid transformational therapy session. and subconscious transformation meditation to recode your neural pathways to feel the love surrounding you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sharing your time and your energy and for sharing your creativity with the world. I would love to give you an invitation to create the magic of flow in your life and work, because I know that the world is a better place when you create the visions on your heart. If you would love to focus and become immersed in creative flow, no matter what else is going on in your life, then hop on my website, sowinflowwithmollymurray.com, and download 15 minutes to focus and flow for free. If you would love inspiration on your creative journey, join the Sow in Flow book club through my email list. Join us each month to explore creativity and spirituality. If you would love community and accountability on your creative journey, I would love to invite you to join the Luminaries Creative Collective, a community where you can take part in lush, inspiring creative gatherings. If you would love to become a thriving creative, I invite you to apply to become a luminary through the Luminaries Creative Collective course for thriving creatives. Experience the magic of flow in every part of your life. If you would love support along any step of your creative journey, then reach out to me about my lush one-on-one creative mentorship packages. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Seahorse Bookstore, the independent bookstore committed to awakening the imagination. Order your books and stream your audiobooks through Seahorse. I am so excited for you to create the impact you deserve and to truly thrive as a creative. Together, we are changing the world in wonderful ways. If this discussion piqued your interest, I hope you stay tuned for the next episode.